it this way. So it's kind of a modular design that our team has developed over the years. So there's not a finite form to what that system is in our minds and in our process. You've seen the light field rig, which, by the way, we had never shown before to anybody. And so that's another version of virtual reality capture. So we have a large toolkit, and we sort of customize, for each production, the recording technology that we're going to be using. But it just continues to evolve, and we keep investing in this all the time and keep developing and refining and optimizing all aspects of the process, from hardware to software, to make the result always better. So.
Thank you.
Yes. I have a small question. I'm just here. I'm interested to know about the language of VR storytelling, and I wonder if how do you cope with the attention of the viewer when you create a project, or how do you think about it? Because you're in 360, you have an infinite point of view. So how do you prepare yourself or create the film?
Well, the first thing that we do is we never try to manipulate the viewer's attention, which is something that is very much done in cinema. It's all about controlling the viewer's attention in mainstream cinema, let's say mainstream cinema. So we don't do that. So we generally create sufficient time and space in each shot for audiences to, well, first of all, feel present inside of the shots. If the shots are too short, there is no time for your mind to just register what is, around you, to register your own sense of presence inside of the shot. Like, all of these processes require time. And that's why we go for an approach to pacing in our virtual reality filmmaking that is relatively contemplative, relatively slow. If all that mattered to us was storytelling, we would absolutely accelerate the pace. But because we care as much about presence than we care about storytelling, then we sort of balance that out, and we find ways to tell stories in a way that is that can use the vehicle of a slower-paced cinematic treatment. And I would say that when you do that, then you don't so much have to worry about where viewers will look, because viewers will have an opportunity to land in each moment and to kind of feel like there's a fusion between the viewer and each moment. And therefore, where the gaze goes is sort of not irrelevant, but it's kind of secondary, because what comes out first is the emotional experience of fusing with each moment.
When you're thinking of the camera as a real person, when you end up staging things that way, you usually end up in a situation where, much like in the real world, you usually know where to look when things are happening. If you're around a table, people talking, you'll look at the person talking when they're talking. You might look away while they're talking, but you'll still be hearing them. You won't, you won't do things like you would in a film where you'll do an extreme close-up of someone slipping something in their pocket. You can't. Well, you could somehow do that, but you need to think of things. If you think of things in a certain way, you don't really have too much of a problem with directing the viewer's attention.
Hello. So when you were speaking about the interactive experiences, I was wondering, with the exponential growth of technology, do you think you'll eventually do a room scale, fully motion with the hand interactions? Cinematic experience?
What was the last part of the sentence? Do we think we will what?
Do you think you'll create a cinematic experience, room scale, with the hand interaction, like HTC Vive?
Right. Yes, so we are developing some room scale things. We're thinking about mixing things like immersive theater with room scale. I don't like things like the wands, because they feel like they're an immersion killer. They're great for games, but if I'm going to be holding a wand, it needs to be something for real. From a storytelling perspective, I'd be more inclined to use something like hand tracking if we're going to use hands than something like wands, for example.
And when you enter into mixed reality, so for those of you who are not familiar with mixed reality, it means that instead of being in full immersion all around you, you're still in your physical reality, but you see digital projections of volumetric characters of objects in your actual space. The language of hands becomes very more interesting because you still see your own hands, you still see your own body. It's not like a sort of an avatar version of yourself, it's yourself because it's real. And then using your hands to interact with objects that are digital, then that becomes very natural. And that becomes very interesting and compelling through mixed reality, in my opinion, more than through virtual reality.
Yeah, AR and MR are really interesting for, they're a really interesting challenge from a presence standpoint because you need to justify things differently. Like, why is something in my living room? Which is a question some AR and MR experiences don't even ask themselves. All of a sudden, there are magical characters here, but they're oblivious to the fact that they're on your coffee table, which could be a fun effect, but I find it can be, again, it's about all those sliders, right? And some of them help immersion and some hurt, and some are gimmicky, some are cool, but also hurt, and some things help. So, one of the things we're really interested in regards to augmented and mixed reality is integrating the projected images onto things that we're already familiar with. So making objects augmented, something you can touch and manipulate, and it coming to life magically, for example, or really justifying or thinking about why any of these things are even happening. The context is always there in any immersive experience. If you're in a VR experience, you control the context. If you're an AR or an MR experience, you don't. So that needs to be a part of the thinking process from the beginning.
So we have just one last question in the crowd.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and it's extremely interesting. Is documenting climate change or the possibility of climate change and the individual relationship to the atmosphere important to you, and possibly also documenting the reversal or the halt of climate change and that whole history? Because I think the enhanced immersive cinema experience you bring adds a new dimension to that. So, and also allows people perhaps to understand the science and the realities of climate change much better than the more standard cinematography. Because I think the cinema brings people into a new relationship to science.
I think you're absolutely right. I totally agree with what you're saying. So what the project we're filming in space focuses a lot on the science that is done on space station by the astronauts. And a lot of that science has to do with, science related to planet Earth and observation of planet Earth. We're filming a lot of shots through what they call the cupola, which is this large circular window where you have this holistic, large view at planet Earth. And so through the ISS experience, we are touching on some of the subjects and topics that you just evoked. We don't have a project that is specifically just focused on climate change in the works.
Why not?
Because we don't believe in climate change.
You don't?
No,
you don't believe it's possible?
I'm profoundly kidding. All I'm saying is at this moment, ISS Experience explores that topic from a very interesting angle, and it's our first foray into immersing audiences in a more visceral way in this kind of science. Yeah, why not? Honestly, if there was a good idea on the table, I think we would probably go for it, yeah.
And I think that's actually a great way for us to wrap our session. Just kind of an open call to please keep in touch with us after this session. You can find us online, but we're always open to meeting with new creators and seeing what's out there, being part of the community. So like I said, there's a lot of digital social ways to interact with us. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. You can email us from our website as well. But thank you so much for joining us for this session. We're more than out of time, and we really appreciate everyone being here. And thank you to the guys. Like I said, it's a lot going on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you.